Solitude is not a punishment. It is power. It is privilege. It is discipline. We live in an era where most men have been conditioned to fear solitude. From a young age, they are taught that personal success, emotional fulfillment, and social validation are directly tied to being in a relationship. They're made to believe that having someone by their side is a sign of worth, while being alone is a sign of failure. But truly strong men have discovered a radical truth. Properly used solitude doesn't weaken, it strengthens. It doesn't impoverish, it enriches. It doesn't confine, it liberates. The power of solitude is one of the most lethal weapons of the man who wishes to become invincible. While other men are consumed by draining relationships, emotional drama, and the need for approval, the Stoic man, the one who masters the art of being with himself, advances in silence with total focus, and nothing can stop him. He doesn't need displays of affection, doesn't chase external validation, and never compromises his mission just to get attention. He lives for himself, and for that reason, he lives free. History confirms it. The men who changed the world, visionaries, thinkers, strategists, and conquerors, were not those who constantly sought company, but those who chose to walk alone. Alexander the Great, Tesla, Da Vinci, Nietzsche, Napoleon, they all had one thing in common. They understood that solitude was the price of greatness. The difference between the average man and the unstoppable man. Most men believe that entering a relationship is automatically an upgrade. They think they're gaining something. But many don't realize what they lose in the process. Their time, their focus, their mental and emotional freedom, their vital energy. They lose direction and begin to live to please others. They become sensitive to emotional crises, constant demands, and mental games. And what initially seemed like love ends up becoming a dangerous distraction that devours years of their lives. The Stoic man, on the other hand, chooses a different path, not because he hates relationships, but because he values his growth more than any superficial bond. He knows that when he's alone, he has full control over his time and mind. He can invest his energy into his body, his wealth, his wisdom. No one tells him what to do. No one drags him down emotionally. No one steals his focus. And that's where he begins to stand apart. While others lose sleep over an unanswered text or a meaningless argument, he works, trains, learns, and thrives. Emotional self-sufficiency, the key to true masculine power. A man who depends on company to be happy will never be truly free, and a man who isn't free will never be strong. True power begins when you stop needing. When you discover that you don't need constant love, daily attention, or emotional approval to feel whole. Most modern men fall into relationships not because they truly desire them, but because they don't know how to be alone. They fear looking inward. They fear facing their emptiness. They fear the silence. But the man who learns to be alone develops a unique kind of strength. He doesn't panic for company. He doesn't react on emotional impulse. He doesn't settle for mediocre relationships out of fear of solitude. That man is feared, respected, admired, and desired because he represents something rare in the modern world, a man who is enough for himself. The hidden enemy, emotional dependency. A man's greatest weakness is not the lack of money or attractiveness. It's emotional dependency. A man who needs female validation to feel good about himself has already lost before he begins. His self-esteem is in someone else's hands, and all it takes is for that person to walk away, ignore him, or reject him, for him to fall apart. He is a man without foundation. Stoicism teaches that true emotional freedom begins when you stop begging for affection, stop worrying about others' opinions, and stop living to please. The right woman won't come when you chase her. She will come when you become the kind of man who no longer needs to chase anyone. And that transformation only happens in solitude. Solitude, a word that makes many people feel afraid, uncomfortable, even rejected. But for the awakened man, for the one who has begun to master his mind, body, and purpose, solitude is not a weakness. It's a privilege. It's the fertile ground where true masculine strength is cultivated. We live in a society that conditions men to fear being alone. From early on, they are programmed to believe that a life without a partner is an incomplete life. That success includes a stable relationship, that the goal is to find someone to complete them. But here's the truth few dare to say. The more you need someone, the less power you have. The more you fear being alone, the easier you are to manipulate. The most powerful men in history were not the ones emotionally dependent on a partner. They were the ones who embraced silence, emptiness, introspection. They were the ones who learned to observe the world from a distance, to build in the dark, and to grow without anyone applauding. Silence as a weapon of transformation. While most men entangle themselves in exhausting relationships, meaningless drama, daily arguments, and a constant need for attention, the man who chooses the path of solitude moves forward with firm steps. He doesn't waste energy justifying his decisions. He doesn't waste time replying to pointless messages. He doesn't divert his attention to meet emotional demands. Solitude becomes his ally, his natural environment. It's in that stillness that he can look inward, confront his shadows, adjust his internal compass, and work with a level of discipline that others don't even comprehend. Every minute in solitude becomes a direct investment in his evolution, and that turns him into a man no one can stop. Why truly strong men prefer to be alone. A man who learns to be alone becomes a mysterious, disciplined, and hard-to-reach figure, and what is rare, scarce, and valuable is naturally attractive. But beyond the attraction it generates, there's a bigger prize. Absolute freedom. Freedom of thought. Freedom of action. Emotional freedom. When you don't need anyone to feel good about yourself, no one can manipulate you. Most men who fall into destructive relationships don't do it out of love. They do it out of fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of judgment. Fear of emptiness. And that fear turns them into slaves. They make concessions. They tolerate disrespect. They lose their identity to avoid rejection. But the man who masters solitude never negotiates his peace. He never settles for mediocrity. He never lowers himself just to be accepted, because he has understood something that changes everything. Being alone isn't being empty, it's being complete. The power to decide without asking permission. One of the greatest gifts solitude offers is the ability to take full control of your life. When you're alone, every decision you make is for you and because of you. You don't need to get anyone's approval. You don't have to give up your goals to maintain a partner's emotional stability. You don't live in fear of hurting someone else's feelings. You can wake up whenever you want. Design your routine strategically, and invest your resources, time, money, energy, in what really matters, your personal growth. You know what that means? It means that while other men are stuck in absurd arguments trying to decode someone's mood or impress a woman who's never satisfied, you're in silence, working, building, advancing. Solitude, a discipline, plus results. When you eliminate emotional distractions from your life, your discipline skyrockets. Suddenly, your mornings are more productive. Your workouts are more intense. Your goals are clearer. The energy you use to spend trying to please others now becomes fuel for building. You study more. You train harder. You make more money. And most importantly, you think more clearly. There's no need to adapt to anyone. No need to pretend. No need to perform. It's just you and your purpose. And that combination is lethal. Fragment 2. Wealth, Respect, and Focus. What solitude really builds. When a man embraces solitude, he doesn't just gain time, he gains power. Power to focus, power to build, power to dominate. While most men burn through their resources, money, energy, attention, trying to maintain relationships that drain their vitality, the man who chooses to be alone channels those same resources into his personal empire. Solitude, financial freedom. Modern relationships, even when fulfilling, often become constant consumption traps for the average man. It's common to see men spending their salary on dinners, gifts, trips, parties, and lifestyles that don't reflect their true will, but rather the pressure to satisfy someone else. But the man who has decided to move forward without romantic distractions has complete control over his finances. He doesn't spend to impress. He doesn't buy affection. He doesn't fill emotional voids with credit cards. Instead, he invests in knowledge. He multiplies his income. He develops new skills. While others try to sustain an unsustainable relationship, he is building assets, systems, businesses, and opportunities. He's not afraid to say no because his energy is reserved for building, not for pleasing. Laser focus, a lethal advantage. The solitary man doesn't need to divide his attention between text messages, mixed signals, emotional explanations, unnecessary obligations. His focus is a straight line toward evolution. Every minute counts, every decision has direction, every drama-free day is a day of progress. While others interrupt their routines for arguments or their partner's emotional needs, he doesn't lose momentum. He reads more. He exercises more. He optimizes his diet, mindset, and financial plan. And it's in that brutal consistency that he begins to pull away from the rest. Men who constantly seek companionship live with emotional highs and lows. When the relationship is good, they feel motivated. When it goes bad, their world collapses. But the Stoic man doesn't rise and fall with external affection. He sets his own pace. And because of that, he is consistent. And consistency is what builds kingdoms. Part 3. The imposition of respect, emotional control, and the Stoic man as a challenge. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll continue with the next section. Respect is not demanded, it's imposed. Something curious happens when a man no longer needs anyone to feel whole. Respect begins to follow him, even if he doesn't ask for it. Women notice it. Other men sense it. Society perceives it. Because a man who doesn't get desperate, who doesn't beg, who doesn't let himself be molded by others, becomes an anomaly. While others chase attention, validation, or affection, he walks straight without looking sideways. He doesn't respond to games. He doesn't fall into emotional tests. He doesn't let anyone pull him out of his center. This behavior automatically makes him more respected, more desired, and more influential. Women instinctively respect the men they can't control. Men naturally follow those who stay firm. And society stops to watch the individual who radiates power and self-sufficiency. Solitude as a shield against manipulation. One of modern man's greatest mistakes is thinking that being accessible, available, and emotionally open at all times is the way to be loved. But reality says otherwise. Excess availability destroys desire. Lack of boundaries eliminates respect. Women test men. They observe who stays firm, who changes his tone, who adapts easily to their demands. And the man who breaks, who bends, who accepts anything just to not lose her, immediately falls in her eyes. Meanwhile, the Stoic man remains unshaken. He doesn't feel the need to explain himself. He doesn't apologize for his vision. He doesn't change course out of fear of being alone. He is not chosen, he chooses. He doesn't beg, he imposes. And for that reason, he becomes untouchable. Fragment 3. Mastery of desire and emotional self-sufficiency. The path of the untamed man. The man who controls his desires controls his destiny, and the one who doesn't becomes a slave to them. This is one of the most powerful principles of Stoicism, and yet one of the most ignored in today's society. We live in a time where desire is constantly fed. Social media, female validation, endless entertainment. Everything is designed to keep men in a constant state of need. But the man who has chosen to embrace solitude as a path has discovered something that sets him apart. He doesn't need company. He doesn't need attention. He doesn't need validation to feel complete. And it is exactly that which makes him untouchable. Uncontrolled desire, the silent trap. Men who don't control their desires live in a state of constant reaction. They react to messages that never come, to glances they don't receive, to voids they don't know how to fill. And in that reactive state, they are easy to manipulate. A simple suggestion, an emotional game, a stroke to their ego, and they're lost. They change their plans, modify their behavior, stray from their mission, all for a small dose of attention or affection. And when that attention disappears, they collapse. The Stoic man doesn't allow himself that luxury. He understands that desire is energy. And like all energy, it can be used to build or to destroy. He channels it, he transforms it, he elevates it. Self-discipline, the muscle that turns a man into a legend. Self-discipline isn't glamorous. It's not popular. It's not celebrated. But it's the only real path to greatness. While others follow their impulses, he follows his plan. While others react emotionally, he observes with detachment. While others chase after women who don't respect them, he sits down to plot his next strategic move. This man doesn't live chasing. He lives building. He doesn't love from lack. He loves from abundance. He doesn't give his energy to those who don't deserve it. And that makes him a rare breed in a world full of need, weakness, and confusion. True masculine peace, emotional self-sufficiency. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's internal mastery of the self. A man who depends on company to be okay, who needs a relationship to feel valuable, who seeks approval in every interaction, lives like a prisoner with invisible chains. The self-sufficient man, however, can be alone and smile, be ignored and remain calm, lose a relationship and still move forward with strength, because he understands that his value doesn't depend on a woman, a like, or a conversation. It depends solely on himself. The inaccessible man, the true magnet of respect and desire. There is something deeply attractive about a man who isn't available. Not because he plays hard to get, but because his life fully occupies him. He's not ignoring you to manipulate. He's too busy growing, learning, leading, dominating his world. And that genuine scarcity, that limited presence, that concentrated energy, creates desire. Because women don't value what's easy. They value what's rare. And they respect the man who doesn't need them to exist. Be a challenge, not an option. The Stoic man doesn't present himself as just another option. He doesn't compete. He doesn't beg. He doesn't justify himself. He imposes his presence. And if someone doesn't value it, he simply keeps walking. This creates an immediate effect. He becomes a challenge. He becomes unpredictable. And because of that, he becomes desired. Because a man who is not within everyone's reach is never forgotten. He leaves. An impression, an energy, a mark. Fragment 4. The legacy of the man who refuses to be tamed. The man who chooses not to be tamed becomes a force of nature, unbreakable, unstoppable, unforgettable. While others crawl emotionally for affection and validation, the man centered in his purpose shines with a different light. Not because he tries to impress, but because his discipline, his focus, and his rarity make him an anomaly in a world full of available, empty men. Modern relationships. Traps disguised as love. Most men don't enter a relationship from abundance, but from need. They believe love will complete them. That validation will make them feel valuable. And with that belief, they've already lost. Because when you enter a relationship expecting to become complete, you automatically give the other person the power to destroy you. She becomes the source of your self-esteem, the keeper of your emotional stability, the one responsible for your happiness. The result? You become an emotional slave. You give in. You stay quiet. You fold. You walk on eggshells. And sooner or later, you lose your essence. You lose your fire. You lose the respect you once inspired. The man who doesn't surrender is the man who dominates. Respect is not begged for. Respect is imposed through presence, boundaries, and vision. A man whose life is so focused, so full of purpose, that not even a woman can derail him, imposes a type of respect that transcends desire, because he's not available to just anyone, and what's not available becomes valuable. This man doesn't get into absurd arguments. He doesn't need to win debates. He doesn't sacrifice his principles to avoid conflict. He acts from the core of his power, and anyone who walks beside him must rise to his level. While others argue, you build. Every minute the average man spends resolving misunderstandings, typing long emotional messages, interpreting silences, navigating the emotional chaos of a partner, is a minute the Stoic man uses to train, read, invest, lead. The weak live in the eternal cycle of drama. The strong live building their empire. That's the secret. Time is not lost in emotional destruction. It's invested in personal expansion. The man who doesn't get distracted grows without limits. The further a man advances, the more he realizes that misdirected emotional energy is the greatest obstacle to greatness. Toxic relationships, emotional dependency, irrational attachments, all of that is an invisible brake on your growth. A man who doesn't need a relationship to function properly can sleep peacefully, plan without restrictions, execute without drama, and most importantly, he evolves without constantly having to negotiate his freedom. Because he knows that his vision cannot be shared with just anyone. His energy is not to be given away. It's meant to build a legacy. Solitude, the forge of the modern warrior. The men who conquered the world were not the most charming. They were the most determined. They were the ones who knew that solitude is the crucible in which true leaders are forged. Alexander the Great, Da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, Nietzsche. These were men who didn't waste their days in relationships that drained their vision. They preferred to walk alone if necessary. But they would never hand over their destiny to the emotional fluctuations of another person. And that principle is still alive today. It doesn't matter your age, your status, or your story. If you choose solitude with purpose, you choose your ascent. If you choose to depend on someone else, you choose your stagnation.